Having talked about how to UV unwrap the backdrop so we can put a flat wooden texture over it or the bike frame, we never really talked about the surface structure, which is actually another element that is very important to be considered for digital rendering. So let's assume the seat we would like to turn into a leather seat. I know it's not necessarily fitting in this application, but let's do this. So I can click on apply mirror because I would like this whole object to be created. And then I'm going to turn this one into the UV editor, U and unwrap, and let's see what I have here. Okay, so this is basically my seat somewhat UV unwrapped. And let's go to Chrome and type in free leather texture. Then we will find a lot of those images. Most of them actually are not very good to use. For example, this one, it has a lot of highlights. So those are cool to use as a backdrop for your computer, but they're not really useful for rendering. This one, for example, is a little bit better. You don't really have highlights on it. So we can use this to texture and also to give our object a surface structure. This one also actually doesn't look bad, so let's select it, and well, maybe we will use this one. So I'm going to full size, and then I'm going to save this image to my desktop. Go to Pixelmator and open that image. There it is. And what I actually want to do is to turn this one into a black and white image. So I have to go to show effects and then desaturate. That would be the same effect, for example, in Photoshop. So desaturate, or to make it black and white. And then I'm going to save this image as a JPEG. Replace. And let's go back to Chrome. And there was another texture that looked good. And this one is too small. Let's go with the one I have. Okay, so again, I go to open image so I can maybe get an idea about the orientation of my mesh on this texture, maybe like this. And then I go to the node editor, click use nodes, and then for normals, I would like to use input a texture, so image. This one will be my black leather. I forgot to input my texture coordinate that goes into the vector. And let's turn this one to rendered. Now I can put the color into color, and then of course I'm using that to texture my object. But if I put this one into normal, you can see what happens. It actually starts shading the surface a little bit. This might even be easier to observe if we maybe turn this one into a grayish diffuse. Then I'm going to add a glossy, and I'm going to add a mix shader. Put this together. 0.2. Okay. And then maybe the color here I put into the displacement. And there you can see now how actually this looks kind of like a three-dimensional structure. But as it looks like the fine grit or the fine lines are coming off the surface, and then the pores are being pushed into the surface, and that's maybe not necessarily what I want. I would like that to invert, so I could either go into Pixelmator and color-wise invert my scene, my image, or by pressing Shift A, I can add a color invert node, with which, kind of like here, I have a factor to switch between 0 or 1, so inverted or not inverted, and then it changes that. Now the texture is a little bit too big, of course, so maybe I can go in and scale this. Oh, sorry, opposite. I have to increase it. Oh, maybe like this. I make it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. But now this leather effect is very strong. Maybe I only would like it to be rather subtle. So I would need a way to change how much, for example, this image is going to affect the displacement of my surface. And to do this, I can add a converter in Math. And now this might sound a little bit abstract. And I can set this converter to multiply. And then here I have a value. If I put this one to 0, I take this texture and then the black and white values are multiplied by 0 and then being put into the displacement. Because they're multiplied by 0, they're not really increased. If I type in 0.1, the values are multiplied with 0.1, which of course is not a lot. If I go 0.01, it's even softer. And there we can see now that you can still see that leather effect, and you see a lot more of that surface reflection. So the finer, or not the finer, the weaker this effect or that calculation is, the more subtle the 3D effect on that surface will be. And maybe here we can make this a little bit blurry, because it can't be really a polished surface because it's leather. Can maybe tint it or give it a look. So this way, for example, you can quickly then create a structured leather surface where we combine a somewhat glossy shader with a diffuse material that gives us the basic color for the leather. We mix it together, and then just create a structural look on the surface. We use a texture input for an image input. In my case, I have to invert the colors, and then with the Math multiply node in a really low value, we lower the strength of this image, and that is then being put into the displacement, and then that creates that look. And the further you, of course, zoom away, the less you will see necessarily the structure in detail, but it all will nicely blend together. And that's a very easy way, for example, how to make leather.